Good morning, and it's great to be with you for this What is God Doing section of our gathering. Today, I want to continue the conversation around racism, and I'm joined today by Rashani. And Rashani, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name's Rashani Bagnall. I'm married to David, and we have two lovely girls who are young adults, Natalie and Charlotte. We've been married, I always get this wrong, possibly 28 years. And we live in Forward in Sheffield, and we come to STC.
Fantastic. And where do you hail from originally, Rashani?
So my father originally is from Malaysia, so I'm a mixture of Sri Lankan and Malaysia. I grew up in Sri Lanka and then came to London just before my 10th birthday.
Wow.
So my mum got a scholarship here a few years before that. So yeah, and then eventually when I met David, moved to Sheffield after we got married.
Fantastic. And David's white British, isn't he? So
yes.
It's a mixed race marriage. What's been your experience then, growing up and living and working in the UK?
I guess in London, because there was greater diversity, there were experiences where I felt different, but not as different as when I moved away. So I think I had a mixture of white friends and Indian friends, and where we settled, there weren't many Sri Lankans. So I think as a result, my family and we've actually tried to blend in more to try and feel less different. And as a child, I remember my mum sitting myself and my sisters down and saying, remember, you've got to work hard, not because you're a woman, but also doubly hard because you're a woman of colour. And I think in a way that is something that I've taken with me into my adult life, where I've worked really hard, not just to blend in, but to work really hard to perform at a level where if there isn't any negativity coming back that makes me feel any different. So I think through the journey over the years, I think God's been trying to undo that so that I'm not as striving, I can be more at peace and enjoy what I'm doing rather than trying to just prove myself all the time that I'm okay.
Yeah, so that's been something that's really been part of your story all the way through, from the way that you were parented to entering into the workplace. You emailed me with a testimony, which is great. You mentioned that being something that has been part of your story, that there was a trigger that has come much more to the fore over recent months.
Yeah, and I guess my experiences, certainly in this country, a lot of it has been covert. So there's unconscious bias, there's opposition, there's greater scrutiny. But there have been times where it's been explicit. And I think the worst I experienced, and I never could share this in cell, either because I'm often the only person of colour, and if I shared it, I would feel even more different. But the worst situation that took place was with a patient's relative in a very middle-class area, where I was with a student. I work for the NHS. I'm a physio, and I went in to assess someone. And the student, whatever happened, I wasn't aware of. I was assessing the patient, but 2 days later, I discovered that the student felt so awful that they couldn't tell me, but they told their university supervisor that this person had said, I don't want that person in the house, and whatever they touch, I will be throwing. And that completely threw me. And I think I came and spoke to David, and he comforted me, and I buried it. I think I couldn't process it. I think it was so awful. And in terms of scrutiny, I think the most recent scrutiny was just before the pandemic. And apart from what we'll talk about is David and I were going to visit Charlotte, who's at uni in Manchester. We thought, let's take the train. We got on the bus on Crimica Lane, and we both had these tickets. It was clear we were both together. David was waved through, and then the bus conductor made me stand there for 5 minutes as he scrutinized my ticket to the point where David came back and said, "Is everything all right?" And it's only when I sat down in my seat I realized actually it wasn't about my ticket. And that, I think it's something, and I think I've never shared it. And because I'm where I live, when we first came here, there weren't many mixed couples, so I wouldn't hold David's hand. So basically, I've developed strategies to minimize the risk, because when you're a person of color, you know the look of displeasure when someone sees you. So I've learned strategies so that when I go to meet friends, I go to the pub, I always say, lead the way, because I don't want looks. If I'm in a new place, avoid too much eye contact because I don't like the looks. So I've got strategies about that to deal with that. And you know, some of my friends who've known me for years, I've only shared this recently, and even with David, I said whenever we go to, on holiday to remote places, because they're not used to seeing mixed couples, that's the way that I manage it. But what I did initially was just bury things. And I think with the pandemic and what happened a year ago with George Floyd, I think it created a moment where people could talk. So I spoke to some of my colleagues who are people of colour, and we spoke, and I actually suddenly realised that I wasn't the only one experiencing this. So that was an opportunity. So that was a time where people started talking about it, and I remember talking to you about it, about how we respond as a church. And then I guess I buried it again, and I found it too much to deal with, so I buried it again. And then recently, I think it was a Meghan Markle interview, a family member said that they didn't share at the time, but at the time of when David and I were getting married, her best friend, when she was excited that her son was marrying a Londoner, and then the next sentence was they were Sri Lankan, and their friend responded, "Oh, what about the children?" And David said that to me, and I didn't think twice about it. But then the next Wednesday, and that's what's good about it, since the pandemic, I felt more confident to have a voice to talk about it in cell group. And initially, it made me feel vulnerable. It made me feel quite exposed. And it's also difficult to explain this to a white person. You might have some idea if you've been a woman and there's been sexism or whatever it is, but it's very difficult. So I've been opening up a bit more about this. And really, I think when it came out of my mouth of what was said, it was almost like an arrow just pierced my heart, and it opened up years of what's been said and what I've just buried because I didn't deal with it. And it's from there that weeks went on where I just felt this horrendous heartache, and the only way I could deal with it was press in and hold on to my family, shared with some of my close friends, and just delved into the Bible. And one of my coping strategies is knowing my faith, knowing who God is. So I have the tension of knowing that and that we are all made in the image of God. God loves me unconditionally. I've got family and friends who love me. And then I've got the dilemma that I'm in a society where I'm different. I'm in the minority. And there's an imposter syndrome where you know, I'm in leadership at the moment at work, and I have been for a while. So you feel an imposter syndrome anyway, we all do. But then you have this situation where actually, if I put myself forward or talk or be outspoken about something, what right do I have? Because I'm in the minority. I should be thankful that I've been given the privilege of coming to the country, having the education. So you have this tension and dilemma. And then the more I think I'm grounded in the word and hang out with God, and my release is running, I have worship songs and run, and I find that tremendously healing and freedom. So I have these strategies of dealing with it. So I guess that's what I did. I pressed in, I had heartache, and I just knew that I just had to trust God. And I couldn't vocalize it to David a lot of the time. I couldn't vocalize it to God, but they were like these, in the Bible, you just groan about it. You don't know how to express it. So So that was an opportunity. There was a free leadership conference for HTB, so came back from work, sat down, and it was great listening to all these inspirational speakers about diverse speakers about refugees and supporting refugees in Malaysia and South Africa. And as I was sitting there and worshipping, all I could explain was this powerful presence of God, but it wasn't wham, bam, but it was the most gentle touch. And because I've been walking around with an open wound in my heart, and I felt this amazing healing and a peace, a wholeness. And it was like open heart surgery, but it was healing it in a way where all the barriers that I put to stop, to actually stop God getting into that. And I felt amazing. And I sat there and I just didn't want to move. And since then, I think what I'm realizing is all the strategies of blending in. I took David's name as Bagnall. I had my maiden name was Salvadore. I did all that stuff to blend in, to not be noticed, and not to feel less different. And now I feel quite released to be who I am, and I'm walking it out to embrace my ethnicity. And in some ways, recently when my uncle died, we connected Zoom through all my relatives around the globe, and I suddenly realized all the overcompensation, the strategies of I've lost some of that identity of my heritage. So it's working through all of that and realizing that I have a voice. And that's why I feel part of my healing is not only seeking God, who has held me, and the cell group that I'm with, I'm thankful for them, because they've just been there, and it's been difficult to hear some of it, but they've just walked me and loved me for who I am. So the strategies is being proactive. I'm passionate about social justice, so having a voice, and that's why I think I said yes to doing this, because it is a bit scary, but also being proactive with social justice, about the inequalities in health, poverty, but also putting at the forefront when things happen. So I feel confident now, and not feel frightened of calling things out when things happen, and I think in the future and moving forwards, if undoubtedly something will happen, because I do think since 2016 some people's filters have been removed. People are vocalizing stuff that they wouldn't have done about people of color, so I feel I will actually address that when I need to. I won't shy away from it.
Come on. Oh, Roshani, thank you so much. On one level, it's really hard to hear some of your experience, and not only your experience, but the way that you've had to shift and morph to try and lessen the threat that you feel, but also a huge thank you in terms of sharing that. I think we do need people to speak up, but also praise God for the HTB conference, Nicky Gumbel and all the work that they do down at that church, and the way that God has met you in that place. And I look forward to seeing what happens next as you embrace who it is that God's made you to be, and see that coming to the fore. So thank you so much.
Thank you.